So, thank you very much, everybody, and welcome back. We're looking forward to continuing our reflections now. I have the honour not only of being ambassador to Mexico, but also of being ambassador to most of the countries of Central America. And Central America is a region where over the last 2 years, Ireland has been doing an awful lot to try and grow its footprint and develop our relations. We have a new office for Central America based in Mexico, which is responsible for the whole gamut of relations. It's been doing an awful lot of work on the political side, as well as in starting a new development cooperation programme. But it's equally important to us to try and develop the full potential of our economic relations with the region. Central America taken together is the 5th largest economy in Latin America. And we're really delighted to have with us this morning Mr. Francisco Lima, who is the Secretary General of the Central American Economic Integration Secretariat. The Secretariat is one of the primary bodies of the Central American integration system and has a mandate to ensure the integration of Central American states into international markets. I know that there's a lot that we can learn from the Secretary General about the potential of our economic relationship, and I look forward to hearing his views. So please join me in welcoming Francisco Lima to the stage.
Good morning to everybody. Very nice to be here in Ireland. My first time here in Ireland, so I'm really enjoying it. Thank you so much for the Irish government for inviting us to this meeting, and had the pleasure of meeting some of the Latin American colleagues, Ambassador of Mexico, Ambassador of Argentina. So my pleasure. So I'm here to talk a little bit about Central America and what we currently are doing in the Central American Economic Integration Secretariat. So this is a secretariat that has been established 62 years ago. So basically, our integration process has been one that has been around even before the European model. But we've lagged behind, certainly. And the main goal of the institution is to create the customs union. And we are currently in that stage. Probably in some of important reflections or basic issues regarding Central America. As the ambassador said, we're the 5th largest economy as a whole in Latin America. We are a market of 52 million consumers in a 500,000 square kilometer territory, quite strategically located, very close to the biggest consumer market in America, which is in the world, which is the United States, as you may all recall. So our relations with the US are quite strong. Nonetheless, as you may know, 10 years ago, the Central American region concluded, happily, the first region-to-region free trade agreement. That's the European Free Trade Agreement with Central America. So it has been in town for the last 10 years. And according to some theories, as I was talking to some of you on the coffee break, it's after 10 years that you really start seeing some of the major accomplishments of a free trade agreement. So after 10 years, I might say that our balance of trade between the two regions has increased. The European side for almost 50%, and as well as the Central American side. Nonetheless, I would say that our exchange of goods in terms of Central American goods coming into the European Union, or Ireland specifically, has kept quite simple. Pineapples, some plantains, sugarcane, and some coffee. Nonetheless, that exchange of goods has increased. So here you would see, in terms of a graphic, Central America being the 5th largest economy in Central America. Of course, I'll be very happy to share this presentation with all of you. In terms of how the in Central American integration, the economic integration, we have 6 partners, which are Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. Panama recently joined in 2013, which I would say it's an important member because of the characteristics of what Panama offers, as you may all be aware. For some of the countries in Central America, as you can see in the graphic, the European Union has the 2nd most important social partner, and that's the case of Costa Rica. That's the case of Panama too. In the case of Costa Rica, more than 50% of what is currently being imported into Ireland comes from Costa Rica, and that's basically plantains and pineapple, coffee, and sugar, as I said. Out of every $100 that Ireland buys to Central America, $42 go to Costa Rica. So that's how close of a relation our region has with Ireland. In terms of market share, you could see here in the graphic more or less what we are currently exporting to different parts of the world. Strong relations, as you might see, with the European Union. Basically, the products that I was talking to you about, Central America positions itself as the biggest pineapple exporter. 3rd, well, I would say 2nd most important coffee producer in the world. Switzerland appears to be in the 2nd position, but as you know, Switzerland does not produce coffee. It only exports branded coffee. So basically, Central America is the 2nd largest exporter of coffee to the world. Rum, sugar, pineapples. Basically, how our regional market started back in 1960, as I was telling you, 62 years ago, and to show how the market, the customs union, the common market has grown. Basically, out of every $100 that were exported in 1960 to the region, to the world, sorry, $7 were exported to the region. Currently, in 2022, out of every $100 being exported, $32 goes to the Central American region. So we've managed to grow, and the intra-regional market it's getting stronger. When one started to negotiate with the European Union as a whole, the condition was the European Union said that it wanted to agree and conclude a free trade agreement, but not with separate countries. They wanted to negotiate with the region as a whole, for reasons that probably all of you might be aware. So in that sense, the reason that I say this is once the European product is placed in the Central American market, whichever way it goes in, the product must travel through the European product, the Irish product, must travel all through the Central American territory without any sort of extra requirements than those placed on the original entry point of the Central American territory. So that's the logic behind the association agreement. We have been informed by the European Commission that finally as you know, this free trade agreement has 3 pillars: the cooperation, the political, and the economic pillar. The economic pillar was quite rapidly ratified by the European bureaucracy, the Parliament, and all of that. Unfortunately, the political and the cooperation pillar had not been approved because of one of the constituencies back in Belgium. So that veto has been raised, and I think that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the political and cooperation pillar will enter into place, meaning that the whole of the free trade agreement or the association agreement will come into force. Basically, the macroeconomic profile of the Central America and Ireland, you can see 52 million market consumer vis-a-vis a 5.1 population in Ireland, and so on and so forth. Interesting fact, when one says about the Central American market, one tends to think about Central America as a provider of goods. But one does not have to forget that almost 69% of our GDP lies in the service area. So we are a net service provider. And for a fact, we export twice the services we import. So basically, currently, we are exporting around 40,000 million US dollars vis-a-vis importing close to 20,000 million in terms of service providing in sectors like banking, insurance, airplane maintenance, back offices, etc. Here, as I was telling you in the beginning, the exports from Central America to Ireland basically rely on Costa Rica. 95% of what Central America export comes from Costa Rica, and basically 93% of what, basically 95% of what Costa Rica exports to Ireland, 95% of the total 100%, and what Ireland imports, it's basically the 95%, sorry, this confusion. So basic message here, it's our import-export is basically concentrated in Costa Rica and El Salvador somehow. So it's kind of a market that has some extra opportunities in terms of trade with Ireland. Top products, plantain, pineapples, iron, cane sugar. So basically, in terms of the goods, we've managed to stay in not very diversified list of products. But the thing gets interesting when one sees the service opportunities that are that you have in the case of Central America. I always say that basically, when one talks about nearshoring and all those shoring words, there's a huge handicap in terms of how we see Central America, and that's how we are intercommunicated. So currently 95% of what is traded between the Central American countries, either coming from an external source, European Union, one might say, travels through Central America by roads. And for us, that's kind of a huge, I would say, handicap. We're talking about 95% of goods traveling by roads which have been in place for almost 50 years. So recently, the Presidential Summit in Central America approved the Regional Master Plan 2035 on mobility and logistics. And the reasons that I'm kind of going in some sort of detail in terms of this Regional Master Plan 2035, it's basically because this will be a pocket of investment opportunities that the region will be offering in terms of the development of infrastructure in Central America for the intermodal way of transporting goods within the region. Meaning by that we want to extend the possibility and strengthen our airports and ports in the region so that we are able to exchange goods by ways other than transport only. So to give you an idea, in terms of, in a 500,000 square kilometer territory, we have 21 international airports. That's quite a high density when one thinks about 500,000 square kilometer territory. On the other hand, we have 40 port facilities, 19 on the Caribbean side or the Atlantic side, and 21 on the Pacific coast. And of course, our interoceanic canal, which is the Panama Canal, which all of you are aware. Nonetheless, having those 40 port facilities and 21 international airports, the irony behind this is that we're moving 95% of our products through our road infrastructure, which is 50 years old. So the master plan takes in place on how we'll connect these 21 international airports and these 40 port facilities. Currently, we are in the process with the European Union of negotiating or socializing this master plan, because the global gateway funds, which are available in terms of the European Union, are funds that will be available for European companies wanting to invest in this type of hard infrastructure. So for us, it's quite very important for the investment community, for companies, business people, to get familiar with this master plan, because this is a plan that comprises of around 374 projects going on the airports, ports, and roads and railroads in Central America. The master plan, the first goal of the master plan, it's a regional intermodal transport system, meaning by that moving goods, both from the land transport and air transport, for example, the transport and logistic network, the efficiency and quality of transport, and the sustainable solutions to urban logistics. This plan also takes in place the urban logistics of moving goods through the region. The proposals to strengthen are elaborated in 11 strategic corridors, which comprise of more than 300 projects in terms of hard infrastructure, and the total cost of this plan is close to $53 billion US. This plan will have expected impacts to more than 40 million people benefiting from it in a direct way. If one comes to think of the Central American population as being one of the 51 million, and one talks about 40 million people being benefited, it's quite a very high impact plan for a region that needs this type of strengthening. Through 11 corridors, 3 of which go from the northern part of Central America to the southern part, meaning from Guatemala to Panama, and you will have 9 interoceanic dry corridors. So basically, the message behind this mobility and infrastructure plan is there's a very important plan, very well designed, with the cooperation of the Japanese cooperation agency. And basically, what we're doing here is presenting to investors this master plan. And once the investors are familiarized with it, probably then the way to move around in developing some areas of the master plan is through the global gateway funds, which will be provided by the European Union. Central America, I might say, it's a region of opportunities. Much of those are probably not on everyday agenda, but here the message is it's quite a very solid, very well thought customs union, still on the works, but lots of improvements have come out of it. We're also working on our second strategy for trade facilitation, which will be launched in sometime this month, which is basically the strategy which will be putting in place some of our WTO commitments in trade in terms of trade facilitation. Lots of more information in terms of Central America are there. Probably the small message behind what I just said is I think that the right way in terms of what Ireland is doing is through its embassy in Mexico, having a specific office for the Central American region. We're quite happy to work together with the ambassador to strengthen these relations between Central America and Ireland, meaning Central America and the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary Lima. And let me first introduce myself. Fiona Flood is my name. I know many of you, especially those of you who've travelled from Brazil today. I'm Ireland's ambassador to Brazil, and shortly, I very much hope, also to the CARICOM, to Guyana, and also to Suriname. I didn't realise how much this feels like being on stage. There's a lot of very bright lights shining up here. But look, I suppose for our second panel, what we're shining a spotlight on this morning is research and innovation, and we have a really fantastic panel for you to take us through the next hour or so to discuss this highly topical subject. Let me first just acknowledge, as Minister Simmons said at the outset this morning, I woke up very early this morning and very cold. And I can tell you, having come from Brasilia, it feels like going from the furnace to the freezer. So I suppose that's one of the regional differences we can certainly highlight here. Professor Theo Lynn, firstly, will be your moderator this morning. Theo is from a university very close to my heart, my alma mater, Dublin City University. He's Professor of Digital Business at DCU. And he tells me that for the business school alone in DCU, Brazil has become its top collaborator for research publications, even ahead of the US. So I know Theo will be happy to elaborate on that really interesting development. And I think I can safely say Theo is a Brasilophile. And I'm obviously very pleased to say that. Maybe next to Theo is Mary Quaney? Apologies, Mary. Mary is CEO of Mainstream Renewables, and she'll speak to the theme of her company's challenges and opportunities in the region. Next to Mary, I'm very pleased to welcome Ambassador Lodomar Gonçalves de Aguiar. And Ambassador Lodomar joins us from the Brazilian Foreign Ministry, where he's Under-Secretary for Trade Promotion, Science, Technology, Innovation and Culture, and you're very welcome. And next to Ambassador Lodomar is Paul Healy. Paul Healy is Chief Executive of SkillNet Ireland. And Paul, not only has he done some really great collaborative work with us in the past couple of years out of our consulate in Sao Paulo, but also tells me that there's really exciting developments which he will be happy to elaborate on in terms of SkillNet's collaboration with Uruguay. Next to Paul is Ken Whitelaw. Ken is Head of Pioneering Markets at IDA Ireland, and I know Ken will be very keen to tell the audience this morning just how many world-class companies in the technology and research space Ireland is happy to host. And finally, last but not least, I want to introduce Des Malarkey. Des is Head of Revenue and Growth at Stripe, one of Ireland's most exciting and innovative companies. And I'm told that every time I get an Uber, I support Stripe's operations in Brazil. So thank you very much. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to our panel this morning.
Thank you. Okay, hi, I'm Theo, and today actually it's a very interesting panel because I suppose from a European Union perspective, the panel kind of reflects kind of three big trends in the European Union policy, obviously that impact Ireland, which is number one, digital, and we have the digital decade, and I think Stripe, a lot of things going on there. And second one, I'd say, is sustainability. So we have the European Green Deal, and that's a massive thing, and I think Mainstream are a really interesting story around that. And the third thing is really about internationalisation and then how knowledge is going to drive all these things. And I think the two big things I'd take there is, you know, we have traditionally looked to the US, or we've looked to India and China, and we said, oh, these are the big areas, say from in the university sector, oh, we should get students. Brazil's my big story. You know, I'm not just into Brazil, I'm into Latin America, so, you know, we have very good contacts in Mexico. I wouldn't like Maeve to think that we're forgetting Mexico. We have a massive opportunity in Mexico, do a lot of stuff in Colombia and Peru, but, you know, just to avoid the diplomatic incident, Brazil's number 2 after the UK in terms of collaborations. So I think it's our biggest non-EU and international partner. But that's in 5 years. And I think like what I'd like to start off by talking about is like the success of our relationship with Brazil. And that's a really big success. That's 80 Q1 publications, you know, which really impacts. If you hear about university rankings, that hits our rankings, you know. But those research publications were in artificial intelligence and applying them to health and energy and also in e-commerce. You know, so they're all in these top areas where we're very interested in the Irish context. I'd like to ask each of the different panel members just to talk about, introduce their organisation and just a bit about their, you know, their views on Irish and Latin American and South American collaborations, and maybe talk about their stories a bit. So I'll kick off with Mainstream.
Thank you, Theo. So my name is Mary Kwani. I'm the Chief Executive of Mainstream Renewable Power. We're an Irish-founded and Irish-headquartered global developer of like large utility-scale wind and solar plants, so offshore wind, onshore wind, and large-scale solar. We have quite a strong presence in the market in Chile and in more recent years in Colombia. We entered the market in Chile back in 2009 when really there was little or no renewable energy installed in Chile. But you know, one of the main reasons that we entered the market, you know, first of all, highly investable OECD, very strong support from the international banking community, a long tradition of investing in infrastructure in Chile, but from an energy perspective, an energy island really, and by that I mean, you know, really no local sources of fossil fuels. You know, you have the Andes Mountains, the coastline, an extremely long coastline, of course, and the perfect resources for solar projects, which we have in the north, up in the Atacama Desert, and then very, very strong wind profiles coming off a wind current coming off the Andes in the centre and southern part of Chile. A growing economy, and a market that, you know, when we entered, one of the fundamentals was that energy prices were extremely high for local consumers on international comparators. Chile had suffered very significantly on the back of the Argentinian gas crisis, so there was very, very strong reasons, including geopolitical and energy security reasons, to install renewable energy. Colombia, we entered in more recent years, and there we were in the development phase with large-scale, mainly wind projects, but also solar. And that market is, from a renewable energy perspective, a little bit less developed than Chile, given that its base and its energy system had been and continues to be large-scale hydro and thermal plant. And again, you know, all the fundamentals to enable a strong and growing and thriving renewable energy sector. Hydro prices or hydro generation suffered with, you know, due to mainly weather effects and drying climates. So a lower generation of hydro means, you know, ultimately, again, higher electricity prices, and then led to governments focusing more on renewable energy targets and putting in place regulatory and policy to enable that build out of renewable energy. So that's a brief overview of our areas of focus in Latin America.
Elmar, this is your chance to promote Brazil.
Well, I think we are here to promote not only Brazil, but Latin America and our bilateral relations with Ireland. I'm very glad to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Irish government, and especially two very active ambassadors, the ambassador of Brazil and Ireland, Marcel Beato, and the ambassador of Ireland, newly arrived Fiona Flood, the Irish ambassador in Brazil. Without them, I wouldn't be here. So they convinced me to change my schedule to come here, and I'm glad I did. It's been, I mean, very productive the last 2 days. I have been also to Enterprise Ireland. I have been to UCD, and now this forum. I'd like to share some brief ideas. First, to say that we have a new government, and this new government, the Lula's government, has put as a priority sustainability and innovation. And when you talk about sustainability and innovation, you're talking about conservation, environmental conservation, you're talking about economic development and social and development and inclusion. And this goes for the whole world, of course. We are talking also about scale here. We have the countries from the Caribbean that created CARICOM, the countries from Central America that created SICA. And in South America, we created Mercosur and also sorry, oh my God, the Indian Alliance, the Alliance of the Pacific, with the other countries from the Indian side, the Pacific side of South America. So why did we make it? Because of scale, to be able to better compete and to share experiences, knowledge, and be able to have a better saying and to develop better in this world. What we are doing now in Brazil, we have focused on innovation. We have more than doubled the fund for development of science and technology in Brazil for more than $2 billion. We have increased the funds from the Development Bank in Brazil more than $12 billion with special interest rates for those companies who want to innovate, to have innovation projects. And we have all the ministries that have at least one secretariat, one department that deals with sustainability and innovation. I mean, across the board. Innovation is across the board, and sustainability as well. When we talk about relations between Ireland and Brazil, I was very surprised when I arrived on Sunday morning to have a business fair created by our embassy with the Chamber, the Brazil-Ireland Chamber of Commerce. More than 50 micro and small entrepreneurs that were there. The Chamber has just been created in March and has almost 100 companies that make part of them. I was surprised to know that we have more than 1,300 businesses, Brazilian businesses here in Ireland, in a population of about 80,000 people. And what struck me as well is that we have most Brazilians who come here to study English, and we got more people coming, especially after Brexit. And those students, most of them, stay here, but they just don't study or go to, I mean, work in, common different places like distribution, food distribution, or slaughterhouses. They create their own businesses. And I've met people who created not only one, but several different businesses. And they are doing that with innovation. We found people with fintechs. We found people in the food industry, and they are starting to use AI. By the way, I just came before coming to Ireland, to Dublin. I was in the Web Summit in Lisbon, and Brazilian startups participated. One Brazilian startup won the best AI startup in the summit. We had around 300 startups that participated. By the way, we have now in Brazil more than 13,000 startups. We have 29 unicorns in fintechs, in agri-tech, in health techs, and the idea is to diversify. I talked about innovation and sustainability, but another word is diversification. And when I say diversification, I say ethnic diversification, gender diversification, and regional diversification. We have here a delegation led by the Vice Governor of the state of Sergipe, which is the smallest state in Brazil, but is here in Ireland to make business. And by the way, I don't know if you can see it at the back, this is an Irish lace that was taken to Sergipe in Brazil in the 19th century. And they're bringing it back here. You can see it outside. So Irish lace is a cultural and historic relation between Brazil and Ireland. And Ambassador Fiona Flood is also wearing that. So there is the possibility of having smaller states and smaller businesses taking part in this cooperation. I'm sorry if I'm speaking too much. Just a final say, about 1% of Brazilian companies export, only 1%. And they're responsible for 15% of formal employment in Brazil. From those 1%, only 300 companies are responsible for almost 70% of our foreign trade. That last year represented around $600 billion. So we have to diversify, we have to bring in micro, small, and medium businesses into the picture, and this is a possibility, this cooperation, to have SME participate in this cooperation with Ireland, which is a hub to Europe, and Brazil is a hub to Latin America. I mean, Latin America is a hub. We have 670 million people. In the European Union, we have 450 million people, so we are more than 1 billion people that can do business together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, from Chile and Brazil, we're moving to Uruguay next. So, Paul, do you want to tell us about SkillNet's activities in South America?
Thank you, Theo, and good afternoon, everyone. Just maybe a quick introduction about SkillNet Ireland. Many of you will be familiar with us. So we're an organisation that's supported by both the industry sectors and government. And I suppose our focus, our role, is to raise the skill levels of people who are in employment in Ireland. And we do that by working in partnership with industry. I think all of us in the room will recognise the importance of talent, of a skilled workforce, and how that intersects with competitiveness and innovation and so on. But skills and talent, important to every Latin American country, of course, but takes on an added significance for our own country. Why? Because to a large extent, we're out there competing on the basis of our talent, the basis of our people, and on our agile and competitive workforce. But it's our gold, and it's a very, very precious natural resource that we have to work on, we have to nurture to ensure that we can prosper and thrive through talent, and that industry and companies have the talent that they need to remain on that competitive edge. So how SkillNet Ireland go about this is we operate in what we would call an enterprise-led manner. That's really allowing industry and companies, the folks who are closest to the challenges and the issues, the people who are best informed to make decisions on what talent is needed, what skills gaps and so on that they have. And then we collaborate with industry and with companies to design and to develop programs that address those. So very much it's demand driven. It's about companies and industry sectors really articulating what challenges that they have, what the competitive issues, the market issues and so on. And then we facilitate solutions with them on a collaborative basis. So we've 62 industry partner organisations. Many of those will be household names to us here in Ireland, Chambers, IBEC, but we also work with a lot of small sectoral organisations, with SME clusters, with regional clusters and so on, yet again in this industry-led, enterprise-led manner. Important part of what we do, it's a public-private collaboration in terms of the finance model, and it's important that we do that. So we expect industry to contribute around €26 million this year to the cost of training with SkillNet. And I suppose that garners a lot of buy-in from companies, but it also ensures that the programs that we're designing with industry are speaking to what companies need, that are addressing a real demand area, and they're having an impact in terms of moving the needle on some of these really important competitive issues for firms. Just talk to you quickly just about where our focus areas are. So we can't focus on everything, so we have to target our resources. So we look very much at the digital agenda, digital skills. We are developing a lot of programs with industry for emerging tech, and it's the obvious ones. It's AI, it's data science, it's cyber, and working with industry and with the university sector actually to co-create programs to address these sort of future skill needs in new and emerging tech. But we also support the domestic SME sector, and really important that we do that in terms of their digital journey. And staying with SMEs, that's the second part of our focus. So we will support somewhere of the order of 17,500, maybe 18,000 small firms this year. And we're trying to target the owner-managers as much as possible, because we understand that there will be a real trickle-down once you engage with an owner of a small business, and you encourage the development and the management development of that owner, and they tend to take a greater focus on their own staff. So that's about making sure that our homegrown SMEs are as competitive and as innovative as they can be, and in the regions well, and in the locally traded sector. And our clusters that we work with in the regions give us that access to companies, allow us to reach right down into the smaller firms and engage them on management development and supporting their teams. The other area that we're focused on, of course, is green skills. It's a talent that we're going to need to support the green transition, and really interested in hearing Mary's observations around it. There's two areas really that we're leaning into. One is around green tech and supporting particularly the whole wind energy project that's underway. But we're also looking at areas like sustainable finance, where we feel that Ireland has a potential of a really good leadership opportunity given the IFS cluster that we have. So it's really around developing the talent that can bring that to the next level. And the last kind of area of focus that we target is around collaboration. And what I mean by that, it's a term that's used a lot, of course, but where our organisation and our networks are often the facilitator of collaborations between universities and within industry, and are often the focal point for developing programmes in emerging skill areas and future skill areas. So that's just a little bit about SkillNet Ireland. Just talk briefly to you just about how we got here and our engagement and wonderful engagement that we're having with Latin America and Caribbean. And really just to give it a very short summary of it, our engagement began from very positive, very proactive outreach from DFA, from the Consul General in Sao Paulo in particular, and I really want to note Owen Bennis's contribution to that. And that led to introductions to the IDP, which is the Inter-America Development Bank. And they're showing a huge amount of curiosity, a huge amount of interest in the SkillNet model and where it could be applied in Latin America, recognising that when you put industry in the driving seat, you can get this real agility and responsiveness. You can build up a talent pool quite quickly, and so it's garnering our model is garnering a lot of attention, particularly from the IDP. That led to further conversations with support of DFA and with colleagues that were based in these countries, and an introduction into Uruguay through the sponsorship yet again of the IDP. And look, there's a lovely arc to the story, because SkillNet Ireland was established 25 years ago, and a photo was shared with me this week showing industry clusters coming together for the launch of Uruguay's version of SkillNet on a pilot basis this year. And I really want to commend anyone who's in the room who's been involved in that programme. And it's wonderful to see it from a conceptual conversation 18 months ago to a country in Latin America, now where we were 25 years ago. And I mean that in the most positive way, with industry clusters in the room, to develop what they're calling, and forgive my Spanish, I'll give this my best, redes empresariales de talento, and that's business talent networks. And that has launched on a pilot basis just last week in Uruguay.
Great. I have to say, we've done work with SkillNet and DCU, and I think sometimes what they don't get across is that they're not only innovating and bringing new subjects to people, but like I know we've collaborated now on micro-credentials and trying to work on more bite-sized credentials for people. So they do a lot, and I think it's a model that can be exported to lots of countries around the world. And I think if you have the opportunity, get the chance to talk to the man. Ken, you're on the forefront here. You're on the coalface of driving these collaborations between Ireland and Latin America and the Caribbean. And tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you, Theo, and thanks too for the opportunity to be here today. So IDA Ireland is a semi-state agency. We've been in existence since 1949, so 73, 74 years, and our remit is to effectively attract foreign direct investment into Ireland, and once they're here, to support their mandates in whatever way we can. We now have 1,800 multinational companies located around Ireland. They employ directly over 300,000 people, which is the most that multinational companies have ever employed across Ireland. That roughly represents about 11% of the national workforce. So it's a huge contributor to the Irish economy, particularly when you see that 70% of our corporation tax is provided by multinational companies as well. So it's a massive part of the Irish economy. In terms of innovation and collaboration, it's a key focus for us. So what we do is not just about attracting multinational companies to Ireland. We don't just bring them here and then forget about them. A huge part of what we do is making sure that the mandates that companies have when they land here is protected and supported and expanded. And our remit is to support the expansion of those mandates in whatever way we can. So innovation and collaboration with the likes of SkillNet and other third level providers and research centres around Ireland is hugely important in how companies, multinational companies, become embedded into the innovation and the R&D ecosystem in Ireland. In terms of R&D, multinational companies spent 2.6 billion last year on in-house R&D, 1.6 billion on outsourced R&D. Of the 301,000 people directly employed by multinational companies, 23,000 have a specific R&D function. That has increased by 55% over the last 5 years alone. So it just talks to the mind shift, the importance of R&D in general across multinational companies, but how attractive Ireland is as a base for those multinational companies to carry out R&D for various reasons. Talent being one of them, attractive corporate tax base being the other, R&D tax incentive and rebates being another. In terms of our focus on Latin America, historically, roughly 2/3, a little over, of multinational projects that we would have won into Ireland over the last decades would have come from North America. So there was a strategic decision made internally within IDA a number of years ago to diversify our source markets. And with that, we have now looked over the last couple of years to Latin America and amongst other regions. So it's still effectively early days yet. Like it has taken us 70 years to get to where we are. So we're relatively young in the market in terms of positioning Ireland as a potential location for foreign direct investment. But we are making good headway. There are challenges and headwinds to overcome, and maybe I'll talk to them later. But yeah, that's a brief summary, Theo.
I guess last but not least, I think Ireland's going to claim Stripe as a unicorn, even it's more like a zebra, but we'll go with this. Do you want to just tell us about what Stripe's up to and all the different good things we're doing?
Buenos días, buen día a todos. It's a privilege to be on this committee with all these speakers. First of all, having been in Latin America now for all of my professional career since 1989, probably, I think Ken, if he's still here, from Smurfit, was the first global expander from Ireland to come into Latin America very successfully. And in fact, the Irish Chamber was launched with great support from Smurfit back then in 1991, which has evolved into the Irish-Mexican Chamber as we know it today. It reminds me, with this gathering, and congratulations to the ambassadors and all the diplomatic corps from all the countries for putting this together. This is really exciting. It's the first time anything like this has happened between Latin America, the Caribbean and Ireland. And it is really amazing to see the room so full and such great energy, and listening to all of the initiatives and opportunities that are emerging from those is really motivating. And when I reflect on the 30-something years, I'd rather leave age out of this for the moment. We're certainly coming a long way. Granted, it may have been a bit slower than what we wanted, but it certainly is accelerating. And just on the humorous side, this morning I recall that somebody mentioned U2 earlier, and that U2 is popular. Very popular in Latin America. Brazil in
You're
particular.
lucky Des is Bono's brother, apparently.
Not to plug Bono, I don't think he needs a plug from me, but the very first U2 concert in Latin America was held in Mexico City in 1994, I believe. I was at it. It was the Zuropa, Zuropa concert. And after the concert was Bono's and the band's first experience in Latin America, and he was asked, what are the differences you've seen between Mexicans or Latin Americans, Caribeños, and Irish? And he said, basically there is none, but there is one thing that does stand out. He said the Latinos do know how to dance, and Ireland has a lot to go when it comes to dancing. But then the river dance came on, and I think we resolved that issue, maybe with a different beat. Going back to your question on Stripe. Stripe is a global company, started here in Ireland 12 years ago, has grown incredibly quickly on the wave of digitalization, Theo, now operating in over 50 countries around the world, with a very clear strategy on where we're going in Latin America. There's three things driving this on a global scale, and Latin America is no exception from these. So it's number one, we're in this era of accelerated digitalization, and we saw the impact of COVID on every industry, on every shape, walk of life, and on all of us as consumers. Our lives have changed and will be shaped forever because of that. So that's the first thing that's going on. The second thing that is going on is the disappearance of cash in our daily lives. It's remarkable here in Ireland and pretty much across Europe, the absence of cash. So the world of digital is driving that. Also our habits, our way of living. So cash is disappearing at a very fast rate. That is also happening in Latin America. Brazil has led that very successfully with PIX, and I don't really see any other alternative in Latin America that eventually the cashlessness that we are seeing here in Europe will also happen in Latin America. And I think the experiment in Brazil with PIX has driven that. And then finally, the third thing that we're seeing going on is this innovation, right? And we heard earlier about 13,000 startups in Brazil, I think 7,000 in Mexico, something like, it's hard to keep up with the numbers here because they change on a daily basis. There's just so much innovation and startups going on across Latin America. I think it's something like over 30,000 in total right now. 13 billion was invested in startups in Latin America over the last 2 to 3 years, more than the previous 10 years altogether. Yeah. So what is happening with these companies, and many of these are digital natives, great companies like Vitex out of Brazil and eBanks out of Brazil, who are becoming world-class players, and Nubank and many others. This is the first time I've seen such a globalization of Latin American companies. And I think Latin America has a lot to offer the world, and certainly in the world of payments. So Stripe, in our efforts to increase the GDP of the internet, which is a massive opportunity, but that opens up a lot of complexity when you're talking about moving money from A to B. And we support thousands and thousands of customers across Latin America currently, so that they can actually avail of the internet and do commerce digitally very effectively and make sure they actually are paid for that. And we're very proud of where we are currently, and we have operated in Brazil, since 2019. 90% of transactions in the Americas actually go through Stripe, and you probably don't know it every day. As the ambassador said earlier, we work with companies like Uber and Amazon and thousands of startups to make sure that the complexity that the world of digital, particularly in the context of payments, is simplified. And through one integration, you have access to basically every wallet, every payment system in the world, every currency in the world, and you can move your money from A to B very effectively and run and take all of the pain about moving money and payments out of your business. We're seeing in Mexico a very successful Stripe operation, not just on the commercial side, but also actually we're putting together quite a significant nearshoring center currently in Mexico City. Education has a big role in that, and that's, I think, a very, I'm really delighted to hear and see today education being on the topic of conversation, because if there's one thing that has ever, or that has held back Latin America in the past, has been, I think, to a large degree, education. And it's wonderful to see that is a main topic, and I also think it's a huge opportunity for Ireland and Latin America to work together, because Ireland has done that very successfully, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there for us to learn from one another. So very briefly, that's what we're doing in Latin America. Stripe building out the global payments and treasury network across the region to support all that innovation, all that digitalization, and all of those thousands and thousands of startups who want to do business around the world in a cashless way.
Great stuff. So what we've worked out now is that Irish people can talk just as long and as fast as Latin American speakers. Okay.
And dance.
Yeah. So just to remind everybody, there's a QR code in the middle of your table for activating Slido. So if you want to ask us questions, you can. I'm conscious that they've told me I'm responsible for bringing the whole event back on time. So I'm going to ask you all maybe. You know, we've mentioned innovation, and I think one of the things that will be worth talking about here is, a couple of things is, what do you think is the critical success factor for collaboration in Latin America? But what are the challenges that people need to be aware of and try to overcome? From my perspective, when I look at it, was interesting listening to Loudmore. When I went to Brazil first, and I treated Pernambuco like it's just like Leinster or Dublin, and then I realised it's the size of 5 Austrias, and I'm kind of going, okay, this is a massive. I think a small college in Brazil is bigger than our biggest college, and so scale is a challenge for me. But then when I look at the innovation opportunity, I go, oh my God, these guys are really, really good scientists, and they want to work with us, and they're very nice, so there's a lot of similarities. So maybe if each of you, and I'm conscious of this, so I'm going to keep you to 2 or 3 minutes each, okay? Is, what do you think the critical success factor for having collaborations in the region or innovation in the region? And then the second one is, what's a challenge you think that people have to be aware of, and that as a group we need to think about how do we overcome these things? I'm going to start with Mary.
That's a big
fast question.
Yes, I'm like, okay, 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll start with the challenges. I suppose from my perspective and the perspective of the renewable energy industry, and these are not factors that are unique to Chile, but an energy transition is a massively complex undertaking. For governments, for societies, for consumers, for digitalization, for how we use and consume energy. We've had very specific challenges with our portfolio in Chile. That's well documented, and why the pace of installation of renewable energy has exceeded forecasts, and energy systems, not just in Chile but generally across the world, are designed for fossil fuels, and a level of changes are made at an outset in terms of like regulatory policy to enable the installation of renewable energy. But then what we see, you know, really on a global scale is then the pace of you know, those innovative regulatory responses have been too slow in terms of responding to a rapidly changing energy system. And I think that's a challenge that's really quite a global phenomenon, and one that not just governments and policymakers, regulators, renewable energy developers, energy systems, consumers, all are grappling with. But, you know, what's the response? Innovation, of course, in terms of how, you know, we as consumers will consume energy, more smart responses, you know, better use of grid systems, evolving towards, you know, greater installation of even small-scale battery storage, even at a domestic level, combined with renewable energy, can start to take pressure off the grid. So we're certainly in a period which I think is going to evolve very rapidly in terms of innovation, and we see that also in terms of the responses towards, you know, what are real challenges across energy systems. And collaboration, though, I think is a huge strength and an area that we've been hugely focused on over the last 12 to 18 months. We always have been very focused on collaboration with policymakers, but particularly in times of crisis, of course, it comes to the fore. The level of relationship that we have, you know, at ministerial level, at the level of regulators and policymakers is very intense, and it's that collaboration that will lead to solutions. And the Department of Foreign Affairs has been critical in supporting us with that, and I'd like to thank very much the ambassadors whom have supported us deeply, and also at the European Commission level. And then when you start to see that international level of collaboration in terms of focus on problem solving, it's very, very powerful. So in Chile right now, regulatory reform has been proposed. That's moving through Congress, and we're, you know, and we see power cycles going through, you know, very serious challenges, but then, you know, periods of recovery, and that certainly is what I believe we will see more and more across renewable energy landscapes globally as the energy transition, you know, inevitably deals very, very challenging hands to players.
Okay. Mary's taking up half your time. Louder, Mark.
Me? Okay. Well, in terms of let's start with the collaboration. I think first, cooperation has to start within the country. That means governments can't do everything alone. So when we talk about policies, we have to talk about state policies, which means to bring together governments in all levels. In our case of Brazil, federal, regional, and local level. We have to take on board the business community, the academy, and people, civil society. And of course, we cannot forget congresses who pass the laws. You know? And this is a big issue today internationally on digitalization, on AI, on future technologies, because we don't know, are we going to regulate it like the EU? Are we going to just have a code of conduct like the United States? Are we going to have both together? So it's a huge issue. And when you talk about digitalization and AI, what worries me the most is the digital divide. We already have within our countries and between developed and developing countries this huge digital divide. So how do you include people? How do you turn rhetoric about cooperation, international cooperation and collaboration into implementation? And I participated recently in the AI Safety Summit in London, and I was glad to see that people are talking about safety, all the safety issues that we may face if AI and other technologies come to the wrong hands, but also that we have to bring it to all people. You have to use it for the good of people. How do you do that? If today we have more than hundreds and millions of people and children living in poverty, without eating, without knowing what they will eat the next day, if you spend trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars in warfare around the world, but you can have the commitment of developed countries to abide by the commitment in 2015 in the Paris COP to contribute with $100 billion to climate change. How are you going to deal with digitalization, with AI? Who will be part of it? And the scale of this, and we are talking about AI, but if you start to talk about quantum computing, we can't even think about it. What will happen with those who have it, who have the supercomputers, and who have the money to invest the billions and trillions of dollars invested in these new technologies, and those who can't have it? So cooperation, like between Ireland and Latin America. This is the key between the academies, between the businesses, between the governments. And just to finish, I forgot to say made in Wa. Yeah? Good morning. Is it right? Made
No,
in Wa?
but don't worry about it. We like the intention.
So they taught me wrong.
But, you know, it's an interesting thing because actually we've moved our research with Brazil onto quantum computing, and we talk about AI all the time, but there's equally, 5, 6, 7 other types of deep technologies that we need to actually address, and the idea of agile regulation in the context of sustainability or AI or payment systems and international payment systems is very important. We're running out of time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a big question, so I'll try to get it done in
Big question, small answers.
Small answers. So look, if we asked everyone in the room here for their definition of innovation, everyone's going to have a different one. But the history of it, and if you look back in history, you will find the evidence to explain it. And you recognise this, I'm sure the early economists talk about labour, capital and the means of production. You bring them together and that's how you create wealth and that's how you create innovation. Now that's old-fashioned language, but if we're to bring it into the 21st century terms, the means of production is technology. It's emerging tech. Capital is fundraising, seed funding and so on, and availability of banking resources and all of those things. And labour, of course, is talent. But it's not just talent, it's creativity, it's ideation. So, you're not going to get innovation on one of those strands alone. So innovation, I think, is about bringing together the 3 strands of talent, of technology and investment. So maybe if we just put that into practical terms as an example of what it might look like. So working with colleagues in IDA, and this goes back to 2018, and that we're at the earlier stage of this wave of AI that has since landed. It was being kind of expressed to us by IDA and by the multinational sector that, the country that's really going to compete for new investment in AI is the one that can produce postgraduates, master's students in AI and do it at a reasonable scale. Now, the challenge we had is that we didn't have one. So there wasn't a postgrad offering available in Ireland back in 2019 in AI. And I suppose the challenge that set us was how could we use our model, our industry-led model, and our partnership model with universities, to co-create a program in an emerging tech that was so rich and so changing that required massive input from industry, but also huge input from the academic teams. So bringing together your own university, DCU, University of Limerick and University of Galway, together with experts from 40 tech companies, we designed and co-created Ireland's first Masters in Artificial Intelligence. Since then, 300 people have graduated from that programme. Now, you might think that's small, but for a small country, that's a huge boost, a huge talent shot in the arm. And the net result of this, and Ken might comment on it, the net result of this is our tech sector is now more competitive in terms of AI investment in AI projects because we brought the talent in. So yet again, talent, investment and technology. And when you bring those together in that blend, that's where you can see this real innovation and growth being unlocked.
Very good.
Great, that's a good answer. Mm-hmm. Not short answer. You've got to beat his short answer now.
I'll try to, yeah. But just to follow on from Paul's point there, in terms of one of the critical success factors, absolutely talent and the availability of talent, the recognition globally of the Irish talent ecosystem, but also the level and qualification of graduates coming out of the tertiary ecosystem in Ireland is almost second to none. I mean, it ranks right up there globally and obviously on a European scale as well. So it is one of the key differentiation factors that Ireland can position itself on. Just in terms of the other critical success factors, I guess, from an IDA point of view and the companies, obviously, I think it's imperative that all companies, that their Irish sites have and embrace innovation and R&D as one of their strategic imperatives. Once they do that, they have to get approval for that mandate from their parent co, wherever that's located. Like I said, RDA has 22 offices globally, so part of our function is to meet directly face-to-face with the HQs, wherever they are around the world, to kind of help position Ireland as being a suitable place for R&D and innovation. And once they get that approval, then to engage with right partners, the like of SkillNet and the other service providers and training providers in the ecosystem. I think in terms of challenges, I think the model here has been proven over so many years, over decades, and I think that the challenges from an Irish perspective, or more from a Latin American perspective, is actually putting Ireland on the map as being a potential location for future R&D, and I think that's a challenge we're going to have to try and overcome.
Now, Des, I have a question from the audience for you. Is Stripe planning to expand to other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean besides Mexico and Brazil?
Well, we certainly have a plan to expand beyond the countries where we're currently operating in. As I said earlier, the world of digital knows no borders or boundaries, and we will certainly be looking at those countries as we continue to grow out in Latin America. To your other question, I would reiterate what my colleagues have said. But to put it in context in the whole conversation about AI, not to diversify too much into it, rather than be afraid of it, I think we need to embrace it. We don't fully understand it yet, and we don't fully understand what the potential of it is, but I always use the analogy, you know, Excel didn't do away with accountants. Computers didn't do away with the need for humans to be involved in everything. It created a whole new industry, a bigger industry, and I think AI will ultimately do the same thing. And in the world of digital, there's so much coming. It's beyond really our current imagination. Only 12% of commerce today is done digitally. 88% is done in a manual fashion across all sorts of industries. So to grow that and the potential that's there, we're going to need a lot. We're going to need a lot of technology. We're going to need a lot of computing power. We're going to need artificial intelligence. We're going to need people in the right places, where it's nearshoring or farshoring, whatever. But probably the most important thing is that proximity to the end consumer. With all of that technology, all of that artificial intelligence, and also those countries or people, as Paul said earlier, that have taken that leap and leadership position, as Ireland is doing in AI, that is another wonderful opportunity for our colleagues in Latin America to learn about. So I think that it's all there, Theo, and it's a very exciting wave that's coming our way.
So maybe I'll just sum up. I think that what we're saying is, you know, reduce the boundaries of doing business. All right, that's number one. Any barriers to doing business, let's reduce them, and let's do it in a flexible and agile way, so we'll respond to changing the environment. And I think, just going back to something Des said, and it's kind of we'll bring it to the next speakers, which is, you know, we need to activate the micro SMEs and the SMEs, which make up 90% plus of most of the countries in Latin America and Caribbean and in Ireland. Once you get outside Dublin, 98% micro SMEs. We need to activate them into the digital age. We need to think about new sustainability challenges for those types of businesses and those types of homes. Our next two, I'd like to thank our panel. Our next two speakers, I think, are perfectly poised to answer some of the questions people have posed on Slido, but also some of the topics that have been raised here. I have Minister Cleary and Leo Clancy, the head of Enterprise Ireland, talking about, I suppose, the export potential and the market potential in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank the people who offered up their questions. I hope we answered some of the questions with short answers, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today.
Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? No? How's that? Yes, very good. All right, I'll just work out how to make that work. Okay, well, after that very excellent session, we're on to another one, which I think is going to be a really interesting one. I have here, obviously, the Minister for Trade Promotion, Darragh O'Leary, who oversees many of the ongoing efforts to boost Ireland's trade and investment relations in the Latin American and Caribbean region. And we also have the CEO of Enterprise Ireland, Leo Clancy, who is responsible for developing and growing Irish enterprises across the world. And obviously Latin America and the Caribbean is a big focus. I just want to share with you a little nugget that I just learned that I thought was, totally, if you pardon the pun, bananas. Every banana grown in Belize is exported first to Ireland. That was an astonishing little fact, which I wish I had known in my previous job. But it just proves how Ireland's geographical place in the world can help in trade terms and how markets and opportunities are there to be exploited. So, Minister, if I could start with you. The government's strategic approach to driving trade and investment all comes under the Global Ireland programme. So can you flesh that out a little bit for us and tell us a little bit more in practice about what this means?
So Jude, Global Ireland is a DFA initiative. I want to thank our colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs for organising this event today. This is the first of its kind. We're going to double Ireland's presence and our impact worldwide through the Global Ireland strategy. It also aligns with our trade and investment strategy for my own department, which is entitled Values for Ireland, Values for the World. That lays out our trade ambition, but also our trade values that we're pursuing as a country. It has a couple of key aims, supporting sustainable growth, continued prosperity for ourselves, obviously, as an island, but our trading partners, higher living standards all across our trading relationships. In terms of the LSE region, since Global Ireland was launched, we've had 7 ministerial-led visits to the region, including one by the Taoiseach last year when he was minister in our own department. He was in Chile as part of the St. Patrick's Day, and there will be a continued ministerial-led presence across the region. And we also have opened up offices in Sao Paulo and in Austin from Leo's colleagues in Enterprise Ireland, so that Irish companies who want to break into the market, who want assistance, can use Enterprise Ireland's expertise, but also work with the very close collaboration between Enterprise Ireland and the Department of Foreign Affairs on the ground through the LSE region. So there's huge potential there. We're putting the boots on the ground. What we want now is Irish companies to align with that ambition and join with us. And you never know, the next time you join us, you might have more quirky facts like the one you just gave us.
Like the bananas. So boots on the ground, as you say, and the opportunities are there, but there's a tremendous energy. How do you harness that in practice?
So I had a wonderful event. Earlier this year, we launched the Brazil-Irish Chamber of Commerce in City Hall, just at the front of the complex here. I think we had 400 or 500 people that night. It was an amazing energy in the room, but there was also an ambition. I want to thank all of the ambassadors in the room who are driving this. We're about to launch a regional chamber so that all of the Latin American and Caribbean countries will come together in one chamber of commerce for the area. And that will bring a focus to the opportunities, but also give a forum for the challenges so that we can address those in a structured way. I think that's going to help. But also, as I said, Leo will speak to the Enterprise Ireland presence, the IDA presence in terms of inward investment, and I know we're going to have Hortifood later in the day who are Chilean. We're setting up a base here in Ireland as well. So IDA, in terms of attracting inward investment, are doing their bit. Enterprise Ireland, in terms of facilitating Irish companies investing, and I think we're going to grow this partnership.
The part you've missed there came up in an earlier panel, which was about the dancing. You've got to get the Irish, the Latin enthusiasm for dancing going, I think.
But we're pretty enthusiastic when it comes to dancing. Just give us a dance floor, we'll dance.
Yeah. Leo, a similar question, if I can bring you in now. What about your own activity in the region? Whereabouts do you see the potential, and how do you want to go about harnessing it yourselves?
Yeah, so really exciting region, first of all, and I'd like to echo the Minister's comments and thanks to our diplomatic corps, first of all, the Department of Foreign Affairs and all the embassies and consulates, and really welcome that we've taken the Global Irish approach now of expanding our presence, because no matter what you do in life with other counterparts, it's about relationships. And I think our diplomatic corps is doing a superb job of building relationships across Latin America and Caribbean, equally to our colleagues who are ambassadors here in Dublin and their visiting colleagues from our counterpart agencies seeking to bring investment into and build trade links across the region. We have had numerous bilateral meetings in the last couple of days. We'll have more tomorrow, more this afternoon. So there's a great energy and willingness to do business, to do more, and I think huge interest. So that's the people piece, which I think is the most important piece of any trading relationship, is really strong. And there's good trust and I think good cultural openness and alignment. So that's really positive. In terms of our practical presence, we have an office in São Paulo where we employ 3 people whose job it is to help Irish companies succeed across Latin America. We have my colleague Danielle from that office in the audience today. We've also got Sarah Hill in our office who's based in Austin covering Mexico and other markets from there. So a lot of focus going in. We've got 200 companies exporting to Latin American Caribbean region at the moment. That represents, their exports represent 324 million of exports from Ireland, and that's products and services from Ireland into the region, not counting the operations of companies that you heard from earlier like Smurfit and Kingspan, who have operations in the region where there will be additional sales that are manufactured locally, sold and traded locally. So growing impact. That export number was up 25% last year. And that's in a year when we grew exports by 19% across our base. So Latin America, Caribbean is growing faster than average, and we're delighted to see that. 200 companies is fantastic. We think, though, we have 2,000 exporting companies, so we think there's loads of scope to grow. But overall, really positive relationships, and we're seeing it across many different sectors. Manufacturing, to a large extent, actually is localized. We're also seeing Irish companies like Mergon investing in places like Mexico for sub-supply into other regions of their business. So lots of really positive trade links in that context. What surprised me as I looked at our numbers was the size of the services industry. And we heard a colleague from Stripe earlier speaking, and Paul from SkillNet Ireland talking about the interest in training, and we have a huge Education in Ireland footprint as well from Latin American students who come here to learn English or to study further education or technical disciplines. So just so many links across different areas. It's a great market relationship to have, and we're really optimistic about the future.
And the growth that you're seeing, is that coming from the large companies like, the ones that we've had on panels this morning, Smurfit, Kingspan, Stripe, or is it from smaller startups that you're seeing breaking into the Latin American and Caribbean markets?
It's both. If you look at Smurfit and others established for a long time for packaging a lot of the export goods and other areas from the region. So there's very long established presences that have been there for a long time. We're seeing companies like Dayon, a relatively recent cybersecurity company, breaking into key markets where there's large contracts and relatively new markets. So it's a real mix, actually. And like I said, the services economy in Latin America, Caribbean is a really interesting market because it just takes 1 or 2 big wins for some clients in that space to make this region their most important destination market.
No, absolutely. Minister, if I can come back to you, what's the main differentiator for the Latin American and Caribbean region in terms of attracting trade and investment from Irish companies? What does it offer, or what areas do you think need to be exploited more?
So, June, you break it down, there's actually 33 countries involved, so it's not just a kind of a region. Each of the 33 countries have different strengths. They share. Some of them share our strengths in pharma, others are strength in tech, as Leo's referenced in services. So we have a really good subsystem of companies here who have the capacity to move into Latin American Caribbean on the basis of the work they have done here. We've seen that work incredibly successfully in Northern Europe in particular. Irish companies serving high-tech construction here are operating incredibly successfully based on their experience here. There's huge opportunities there as well. I think, they share, many of those 33 countries share our trade focus, they share our willingness to a rules-based trade system, And now that with the growing support network we're putting in place, the bridge to get there will be a lot easier. And the willingness to work with Irish companies getting there will be a lot easier. You know, we've had some of the big examples here today, some of the big companies, but again, we can also highlight some smaller companies as well. And I think, you know, it's the commonality that we have there. The experience Irish companies have here of serving globally out of this space will work in LSE as well.
So it's sort of success begets success and growth.
To a certain extent, and we can show examples of that, you know, as I said, in high-tech construction, but that high-tech construction sector came out of Irish companies that can service the pharma sector here, the tech sector. And they're using the skills they've picked up here across the world, and there's no reason they can't be used as, you know, Latin American and Caribbean countries are expanding in pharma. They need that kind of experience. As they're expanding in digital, they need that kind of experience. So we've got those companies.
And just, I mean, it's a question for both of you, really. This expansion, is it complementary or is it a competition for Ireland?
Happy to start on that one. I think it's absolutely, there are areas we compete, but actually they're diminishing over time. So classically beef, if you look at it, would be one of those areas where with South America in particular, people would have worried, particularly the industry here might have worried about competition at various times. But I think for both of us now, the demand for nutrition and the pressures on the food system are such that actually there's huge opportunity to complement one another. I mentioned to you earlier, just this morning, had discussions about 2 beef industry agri-tech products. So one that's an ingestible bolus that tells you what the gut health of the animal is, that can reduce methane emissions, and another that is a weighing device, effectively, for cattle that tells you when they're ready for optimal factory transfer. So those are 2 things that I'd like to think those Irish companies could find customers for in the Brazilian beef market, for instance, and other markets around the place. To the Minister's comment about digitalisation, I think that's a global game where we will benefit from Latin American, Caribbean companies, technologies that can be deployed here. We've also got a long history in this space. Digicel, most people will know, is a very significant player in the Caribbean region. In particular, I was fortunate to be the engineer who made the first mobile-to-mobile call on their network in Jamaica in 2001. So I hadn't slept for about 50 hours, I think, but that was a significant contribution to the digitalisation of the Caribbean and competition in the mobile market. So I think in that context, to the Minister's point about high-tech construction and other contributions that we can make, and we expect there will be contributions in the other direction, I think we can bring complementarity. To your starting point, I'm not sure we, even with the influence of rum following that first call, we brought a lot to the dancing calibre that's deployed in Jamaica, but that's another day's work.
Are there, looking ahead the horizon for the next 5 years then, what kind of sectors stand out at you particularly? Again, we could start with you, Leo.
I think innovative tech, to some of those last examples, are really interesting for us in terms of the Irish trade story, outbound. I think actually the opportunity for Irish companies to onshore in Latin America and Caribbean is really interesting as well. There's huge new opportunities, and we necessarily look at this with an outbound lens because that's our lens. So you heard my colleague Ken from IDA talk earlier. We think there's huge opportunity for Ireland to be a launch pad for Latin America, Caribbean companies into the European market, because no more than we might look at Latin America, Caribbean, as the Minister said, as a very as a location of many different jurisdictions, Europe looks exactly the same if you're a company looking to export. And I think if we can get those links at the trade and economic development levels right, we can do some really special things together. But I'd say innovative tech from Ireland, Irish companies continuing to invest in manufacturing and engineering presences in the region, in Latin America and Caribbean. Those would be 2 that I'd be very optimistic about. Financial services is another one. We have a particular strength in Ireland, as you heard with Stripe, but a lot of early stage startup companies, and I think huge potential there as well.
Yeah.
I think Enterprise Ireland have a particular investment in agri-tech, and there are companies here being set up to assist Irish agriculture in the transition, in the climate transition towards lower methane. I think they have massive potential in LSE. We saw some of them at the Enterprise Ireland exhibition at the National Ploughing Championships, and they're really well primed in a couple of years to set up bases because Latin America and Caribbean face the same emission reduction challenges as we do, potentially on a greater scale. And I think we are a long way ahead of the digital or of the world conversation in the technology in this space.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that as both of you were speaking there, that sprang to mind from my time in Latin America is how many very innovative, particularly in fintech companies and financial services and things like that. Is access to capital something that Ireland can help with?
I think it is. We have a huge financial sector here in Ireland. We're growing. We're on a growth trajectory in terms of capital going into industry. It's a challenge everywhere at the moment, particularly in the current constrained economic environment. But actually, Irish companies are building more and more links globally in terms of access to capital. We have that huge investment base here as well. So I think there's certainly opportunities. And I heard the previous speakers mention sustainable finance as well as an area that's growing very strongly. There are lots of assets under management here in Ireland. So I think that's an area for a discussion to continue.
Yes. Minister, do you want to come in there as well?
I think sustainable finance, green finance, as it's known colloquially, is going to be a massive growth space. Irish companies are leading out on some really interesting products there. Ireland is a small market. We like to think ourselves as big. So again, this is a space where there's opportunity. But what we need is Irish companies to actually use the resources that are being made available through Enterprise Ireland, through IDA, but through the Department of Foreign Affairs. We use the phrase Team Ireland, and we mean it. We mean all of our agencies coming together, our department coming together, and I think Irish companies just need to take that ball and run with it.
One sector that came up in one of the earlier panels today was energy. This is obviously, Ireland's got a lot of wind and a lot of expertise on both sides of the Atlantic here. Is this an area that you're also seeing, Leo, that's taking off?
It's huge, and I think you've heard the Irish story about our potential 70 gigawatts of wind around the coasts of Ireland. So really interesting. We have a lot of companies already working on wind projects around the world, but particularly companies like Mainstream Renewables who have built out a great business in South America. So I think there's lots of potentials for more companies to do more in the market, and I think vice versa, to learn more. And we will need more capacity in Ireland to build out the renewable base that it's our ambition to have. A lot of that demand in terms of actual construction is going to show up from probably 2028 through to 2045. So I think this represents, for wind-focused and infrastructure-focused companies more generally, a huge opportunity, because the one certainty in Europe, in Ireland and in renewables generally is that we have a constrained resource base. So access to human capital from Latin America, Caribbean that can contribute to that, and companies with expertise is going to be hugely important.
Minister, we've heard today, over the course of the day, how the trading and investment figures are really very healthy, growing strongly. But the number of Latin American and Caribbean companies actually in Ireland is lower. We touched on that earlier. So why is that? And how do you fix it? How do you change things?
So we're changing it by putting the investment in, by putting the boots on the ground, by increasing our investment into IDA resources. And we're also, by using today, we're going to have a really good example with Hortfood and inquiring from them how they made it, why they decided to come here. And I think, as Leo has said, we are an anchor country for EU investment to break into the EU region, and that will give companies the opportunity to do that. I think also the greater links we have here, the greater economic links through the various chambers of commerce that are going to be the regional one that will be established, the ones that are being established, to bring more case studies to show to incoming countries that this is a good country to invest, that incoming companies will be able to build a confidence. And in the last 10 years, we've opened 3 new diplomatic missions in the Latin American Caribbean region. That's serious investment on our part. And as Leo has said, we have presence in Sao Paulo through Enterprise Ireland and in Austin. So we are servicing those markets by putting people on the ground and putting resources on the ground. And we're willing to expand that in the context of the Global Ireland footprint.
Are you seeing generally that there's surprise in the Latin American and Caribbean region at what Ireland can offer and how Ireland can be a gateway into Europe? Or do companies know about it but just aren't quite sure of how to access it?
So look, we're obviously a major EU centre for investment. Is there surprise? Possibly not. For people in the space, they know that Ireland is hungry for investment. I think we have 40,000 students at the moment from the region in Ireland doing various studies here. So we need to use that as an asset, that when those students return home, that they come home with good memories of Ireland, that they become, in a few years' time, investment and decision makers. So their experience with students here will count in terms of investment decisions in a few years. But we also need to keep our investment proposition competitive. You know, tax, skills, infrastructure, political stability, they are all key things that attract any company into the country from wherever they're coming. And coming from the Latin American Caribbean region, companies make the same kind of business decisions. And we've got to probably communicate better that Ireland is the best place to do business in and to base your EU base in.
And the other way around, do you feel, Leo, that Irish companies are, you know, Latin America and the Caribbean is a massive region and they don't quite know where to start? Or do you think it's mainly a focus on the big established major economies of Latin America and they're not so aware of the other markets?
We have a slight Irish disorder, I won't call it a disease, in terms of gravitating towards English-speaking markets, and it's probably the curse and the benefit of growing up in an English-speaking environment. It's much easier to think first about English-speaking markets because we have a huge one on our doorstep, we have a huge one across the Atlantic, and often you will see companies go to Australia next after they've done UK, Canada, US. So that I think that can be an obstacle just in terms of as something of a bias. I think that's changing though, and as you said, examples are hugely important. So we have 200 companies trading across all sectors into Latin America and Caribbean, and I think the fear factor and the closeness bias and the language bias is diminishing. We saw the Eurozone grow by around the same as Latin American Caribbean last year, so we're certainly seeing a discernible change away from just, not just, but a bias towards English-speaking markets. I think that's probably the big one. Using our offices to raise the awareness, reduce the fear factor about the differences in regulation as well as language and culture and other things is really important. So we do have that fabulous network through all the people in the room today who can help reduce that fear factor, and the stories. You know, we heard Smurfit Kappa earlier today offering to share their experience with others. We have companies like Water Wipes and Combilift and Day On, you know, across so many different sectors, there are people who give freely of their views and opinion and advice in how to get started. So I think it's about continuing to do the job. We're at 200 really great companies exporting today, plus, as the Minister mentioned, those inbound students that are finding their way to Ireland to build their early careers and hopefully go back with a good impression. The more we do that, business is about connections between people.
I think as well, I don't think a lot of companies who aren't involved in the Enterprise Ireland experience, they probably don't understand the level of support they get. The level of, I won't say hand-holding, but the level of guidance is very deep and it's immense, and you're dealing with experts in the various market. And I always say to any company, if you've been courageous enough to set up your own business, if you're courageous enough to actually take that step, then just go for it. You know, the fear factor is real. Business people are so busy trying in their own business, they don't have time to step out of it and see the opportunity. So if you have the guts to be a business person and to depend on someone else for your income, not know where it comes from, then trading internationally, trading in the LSE is no problem.
Yeah. You just mentioned just now the educated workforce and attracting students. Is there more collaboration between universities that can be done as well?
I think there's a huge amount already. There's obviously competition between Irish universities to get this. That's healthy. But, you know, MOUs have been signed with colleges in Mexico and I think DCU and other Department of Further and Higher Education are doing that as well. But I think we need to probably resource our third levels and our fourth level institutes as well, to have presence out there, to have a deeper presence, and use that skill, use that amazing resource we have of 40,000 at any one time, people from the region who are using Ireland as their education experience. They're immersing themselves in parts of the Irish education system, and you can't put a value in that. They are our ambassadors in a different sphere.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I've been in Ireland for 2 years now, and I think one of the things that you find really striking is how large the Brazilian community is here. It's massive. There's loads of people. Some come to work, some come to study, or both, I think. And obviously some stay on, and then tech companies attract a very, very multilingual and crowd of people from a number of different backgrounds. So is Ireland doing enough to keep these people rather than just training them and exporting them back home?
I think we are. I think we're the kind of, we're a country of emigration traditionally. In the context of this forum, the founder of the Argentinian Navy is a mailman. When you go back 300 years, we have that tradition. Now we're a country of immigration. And we're bringing this amazing asset, for want of a better phrase, this amazing resource to our country. And the one thing about the Brazilian community, they're spread around the country and they're bringing that richness and diversity. It's not just the capital city, but right around the regions. We are currently at full employment. It's something we were working very hard to maintain, and we're working with companies who need to bring in expert skills or need to add to their skills in terms of work permits and work skills issues. So we're always willing to work with companies who want to give the opportunity to people to stay here or to come here with their skills.
Absolutely. Leo, if we can come back to you. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this panel talking about the opportunities, but what are the headwinds? What are the obstacles that you're seeing to realising these, very full opportunities and ambitions that we're seeing in front of us?
I think there's micro challenges that vary by jurisdiction, but that's true in every trade relationship all over the world. Probably the biggest one is the one we talked about earlier, just that lack of familiarity, fear factor about understanding the market. So that probably is the single biggest barrier. I think addressable size of opportunity in markets as well. Is there enough of a market for me to go in? And if I don't have, for instance, if I haven't operated in a Spanish-speaking jurisdiction or a Portuguese-speaking jurisdiction previously, is the barrier just too big? I think that's unlikely, given that most strong Irish companies are trading across Europe anyway. So I think after that, it comes down to understanding local legislation, what you need to get done. The things that companies are always worried about are things like tax regimes and bureaucracy around setting up businesses. So I think those things can all be smoothed, no matter where we're talking about in Latin America, Caribbean region. So from then, I think it's about engaging with ourselves through our Austin or Sao Paulo offices, engaging with our consulates who are fantastically supportive of trade, and, as I said, with our counterpart agencies. And I think that's something we're certainly building relationships on today with the inbound delegations, and yesterday and tomorrow, just making sure we have those relationships, that when something is a potential opportunity, that we find ways to find the right person and give some advice about how to go forward.
There's practical obstacles, but that can be overcome.
Can be.
Absolutely. Yep. So this is the inaugural meeting of this excellent event. In 5 years' time, when everyone is gathering here, what will it look like, Minister? What will the trade between Ireland and Latin America look like then?
So I think just firstly reiterate my thanks to everybody in Foreign Affairs for organising today and for the work that they're doing on an ongoing basis. I always say, and I think we have to keep saying it, we ask our team in Foreign Affairs and in the agencies in Enterprise Ireland IDA to do a huge amount, particularly those that serve abroad. We ask them to leave their families behind, leave their networks, to go and fly the flag for Ireland, and that's not unappreciated and doesn't go unnoticed. This is a practical example of what we can do. So we have 200 companies out of 1,800 exporting to Latin America and Caribbean at the moment. That needs to change. So if we maybe set a overly ambitious, double that to 400 by this time 5 years. We need more case studies of inward investment, and I know our IDA colleagues will try and match that. And we get more examples of what we're going to have later from Chile. I think as we're growing our space in renewables, we have a unit within our own department looking at Ireland's offshore potential. We will need skills from abroad to do that. Whether the Irish Atlantic and the North Atlantic will test the skills of experts from Latin America and Caribbean, we want them to take that test. And as we, from 28 on, we're going to need that kind of skill. So that's a pretty good, that's 2028 is 5 years. I think we'll have grown our space hugely. But
you said double. You said double. You heard it here.
Today can't just be a one-off, and it can't just be a flash in the pan. We've got to keep driving this on, and through our own trade strategy and investment strategy within my own department, I know we have a really hungry and that are keen to do that.
Leo, for you, what do you see in the next 5 years? What would be the standout achievement?
Thanks for asking the Minister first, Jude. I was going to say 50% increase.
That's going to be doubled.
But I think the target is now set. And I'm very comfortable actually with the Minister's ambition around doubling our presence, because I think just such a great opportunity. So if we said somewhere between a 50% and 100% increase in the number of companies to be negotiated, over 500 million of trade up from 324, I think that would be a great ambition to aim for. But the most important thing is that we would have better, deeper and longer relationships, and that more people would know about Ireland. I remember I shared an office with 2 Chilean people for 3 months at one point in my career, and on a project in Latin America. And all of us were traveling, so we were both in a strange country. The Chileans and myself were both landed somewhere else, and every morning we'd have the same interaction, that they'd ask me how I was, and I'd say not too bad, and they'd just fall into paroxysms of laughter. But do you know what? Over the 3 months we got to know one another really well, and they understood that my interpretation of not too bad and their interpretation of not too bad were completely different, but we came to understand one another. And I think understanding one another as respective markets and knowing what our respective capabilities are, taking away that fear factor, that's the piece I have the biggest ambition for. After that, the trade is very easy, actually.
Well, I think that's a big takeaway from this panel, really, that feel the fear and do it anyway, right? It does seem that there are very many more positives than negatives. The relationships are already there; they're ripe to be exploited even more. You're expanding the people on the ground in terms of trade missions and in terms of Enterprise Islands representation. So it feels like there's everything to play for. So we'll end up now, because I think everyone here probably in this room is looking forward to their lunch before another busy afternoon. I'd like to thank the Minister and Leo Clancy. I think we've had a very interesting discussion, and we heard the targets, doubling the exports. No lack of ambition here. So thank you very much to both of you.
Thanks, Ruth.